that committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. This is the May 2nd Audit Committee meeting. I am the chairman, Joe Boykin. On the committee are Henry Darby, who is not here tonight, Reverend Middleton, and Mr. Moody. But all members of council have the ability to engage in discussions and ask questions. Members of the committee, y'all should have received the minutes.
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Moving on to item number 2. Members, y'all should be in receipt and have a chance to review the audit report conducted on the probate court dated April 24th, 2024, and additionally statements and correspondence from Judge Condon and other correspondence regarding the audit reporting documentation. I will open up the floor for discussion.
Our chairman of county council is not here today, but in the background section, it notes that Chairman Sass requested the audit to be conducted specifically around some issues. Were these brought to his attention, or just out of the regular course of things, we decided to?
I'd let the administrator address that.
Councilman, they were brought to my attention as the internal auditor works for council.
That's right.
I brought the concern straight to the chairman. The chairman then got on the phone with the internal auditor.
Okay. And they were brought to your attention internally by finance people?
Finance, procurement, it was budget, it was an entire process. If I can get you a timeline,
Sure,
if you would prefer to see it that way.
Any other questions or comments?
We're going to give them an opportunity to speak.
Chairman.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Moody.
Mr. Boykin, I guess maybe Mr. Tootin, who would I ask some questions of, Mr. Tootin, because the internal auditor works for us and his staff work for you? So
They work for the internal auditor, sir.
come up and let me ask a couple of questions.
Could we have maybe procurement and internal audit come up?
So talk me through how the process, how this goes. So my bank, I have a corporate credit card, but it's buried underneath my wallet. It takes an act of Congress to get out. But if somebody wants to go do something, they call you, or they just swipe the card and go. What's the general policy?
There are general policies that go with it. There are policies in which a person can use the card. They don't have to call procurement. But we do have infrastructure in place before you make certain purchases that you must receive approval from the procurement department.
Such as?
Food is being one of them. Other one is being any technology equipment. You first have to go through technology department to get it approved. Then you come through procurement with the approval to make the purchase.
Okay. I saw in the notes there was an audit in 22, I think. Are there previous years? I mean, it seems like we roll through the elected officials every 2 to 3 years. Mr. Stewart, are there?
We try not to go more than 3 years.
Okay.
That's our guidance.
Is this? I mean, I saw it seems like every one we have a review of, there's always a couple of findings, and good on you for. That's why we pay you. And first of all, let me back up and say, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Tootin, I want to thank your staffs for bringing this to our attention. That's what the auditor does, whether it's any department. That's why council has these procedures built in to find things and bring them to us so we can share them with the public. So, but my question is, were there previous audits done before just this? I mean, is this kind of a recent occurrence, or has this been kind of a chronic pattern of issues?
We had, I think, about 5 or 6 findings the last audit, and procurement card was one of those findings, yeah. So
Okay.
we've had repeat, and that was a repeat finding at the last audit. So we have had some issues over the years with the procurement card and other activities in that department, yeah.
Okay, that's it for now, Mr. Chairman.
And if I could interrupt 1 second, I failed to recognize that the Honorable Irv Condon is in attendance here today. Thank you, Judge Condon, for joining us. Sorry. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I too, of course, pastor a church, and we have internal processes and then run the largest division in a school system in this area, and certainly we have those type, cards and processes ourselves. And, my P card, I don't even keep with my regular cards because it's just known you don't want to commingle or by accident make purchases with a card that potentially could get you in this kind of circumstance. When I was chair of the committee a couple of years ago and recognized and noted, some of these discrepancies, and we talked about them publicly during that time. Certainly it was under the cloud of some other elected areas that had, bigger issues. So this may have, not risen to the level that it should. But when those findings in the 2022 audit and the remedy that we thought that should have occurred moving forward in order that these are not repeated behaviors or patterns or practices within that office, what happens when those type processes are not followed?
Well, when we do a follow-up audit, we always look at the findings that we had before, and then if they're repeated again, we put that in the report. And then regarding P card, Barrett's department, they're kind of monitoring that on a continuous basis. So if we had he would get a copy of the audit if we had P card exceptions, and then his department would be alerted that they should be monitoring those too, in addition to when we go back in for a repeat audit.
So based on this timeline, there were some reimbursements made. And so what prompted that? And then so to the extent, I guess there may have been some kind of ratification, or I don't know what your internal systems are here, but if then a P card was used improperly, it's been founded that, hey, this was a mistake, and sometimes people make simple mistakes, and then there's a form you fill out and you go through a process, and our system is a ratification, and then the person either reimburses, and then, but there has to be evidence attached to that. There has to be some additional paperwork that goes, you just don't write a check to reimburse. So when that reimbursement was determined, to whom did that check go, and why did we accept that at that time and not address all of these others that could be in question?
Well, I think the reimbursement occurred. They had within his department. I think that someone, or did you discover it, or was that in his department? The reimbursement.
The reimbursement was within the department. What we do is when we determine that there is a problem with the P card or someone has done something unauthorized, first thing we do is we shut the P card down. We take away all the activity the person can use a P card. Then we go through in the process, we investigate. Once we look and see that there is unauthorized use of the card, then we go to the county administrator's office. The county administrator's office called sheriff counsel, and then we conduct an internal review. So there is a pattern of behavior with the card which was all unauthorized as far as purchases, and that's why the card was turned off until explanation could be given as to why these purchases were made and why they were made against policy.
So is the card still off?
They're off, yes, sir.
They're still off.
Except for
Okay.
one person in the office has a card for limited use.
Okay.
All the procurements have to come through the procurement department to be approved and to also be purchased.
Anyone else?
Are we going to invite Mr. Judge Clement
I was not going to do that tonight.
up? Because I would like to know, I'd like to discuss this, and so I don't know what your
Well,
intentions were.
I will defer to the chair.
Okay, well, you're the chair of this committee.
Well, before we get to that, yes, if that's what you'd like to do, I'm fine with it. And Mr. Tolbert and Mr. Stewart, whichever y'all want to take this question, y'all have had time to work together to come up with various reimbursement amounts that might be appropriate. Could we hear about those?
Well, we have got a little bit of difference, but we had looked at the things that were strictly forbidden by procedures, and we come up with a total for that. So we had the gift cards, which is can be approved in rare occasions, but they would not have been approved. So that was one item. Donations, which have to be through county council. So that was also. We had a number of luncheons which did not involve training, programs, or outreach. And then the other thing that's forbidden is food for employees. There's no training or programs involved, strictly as staff meetings or luncheons or some kind of celebration. So that was the main category. So we had $4,555 for those. And Barrett takes a little different stand since he feels like the procedures were violated, that more should be reimbursed. I'll let him speak.
I would like to hear what the more is considered to be,
I'm sorry.
the additional amount.
Barrett
that-
recommended.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I don't have that number, but looking at all of the food purchases from a procurement standpoint and what we have written on the books, all of it is unauthorized. They're all, in my opinion, would have been rejected by my office and by me if it had been presented to me up front to say, can we do this? The answer would have been no. So that's why I stated, and I'm still firm, that all food purchases should be reimbursed to Charleston County government.
Any further questions? I'm sorry, thank you. Mr. Wareman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm not on the committee, but did want to raise this question. So there's a distinction that I'm understanding here between there's some set of items that were sort of clearly not allowed under any circumstances, and then there's also some that were, I guess, inappropriate because of the sort of lack of procedure and lack of authorization. But it kind of sounds like both of y'all are really focusing on the things that just would not have been approved had the proper procedures been followed anyways. I mean, it sounds like both y'all are trying to get to the same sort of number. I was expecting maybe that some folks were looping in, that the reimbursements might differ along those lines. But Barrett, Mr. Tolbert, I understood you'd be saying that a lot of this stuff wouldn't have been authorized had it been through the proper procedures.
As far as procurement is concerned, all of our purchases, no one, to include me, who operates the program, anybody here, we cannot make purchases for one personal gain or for the operation of Charleston County government. So in my position that I've been entrusted to do, anyone makes a purchase that is not a government purchase that will help or is actually towards the operation of this government, it is going to be turned down. It's going to be rejected.
Any discussion on council about this information?
Want to get into this, or, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'll let Mr. Brodsky in.
Go ahead, Mr. Brodsky.
Operation of government.
When we talk about operation of government, if someone is going to make a purchase that they're going to take home for their own personal benefit or for their own personal gain, or if they're going to use it in the office for their own personal gain, if it's not operating or applying to the government itself being an operation, then it is unauthorized purchase. You have to demonstrate that this purchase is for the government of Charleston, that is going to do something for the government of Charleston in our daily operations.
How would a gift to Morris Brown AME Church help operate the county government? If so, I would like for you all to do the same for my church, too.
Oh, no.
Through Mr. Grabowski.
I just ask because I know we have snacks before we meet. Is that similar to what you're saying here?
Those were approved because it's for the operation of, really, for Charleston County. It's for snacks for you to have in the evening. There are ways we take a look at it, but when we see the excessive amounts or we see where items are being purchased, there are no receipts, no request up front as to ask for permission. We do have guidelines in there for the purchase of food, but when you do not follow those guidelines, it becomes a problem. It becomes problematic. We want to make sure that people aren't buying food and taking food home. We make sure people aren't buying food just for themselves. Therefore, there's a request process you go through. There's a request process you go through. There are departments that have functions where they have training. They ask to buy donuts, water, and coffee for people who come in the room. We will approve those. But when we don't see anything to come across for an approval, for the reason, then we ask that you have also a sign-in sheet so we know that people who are supposed to be there are in the room. When we don't see any of this information, it becomes a question and a question mark as to what is going on. And when we repeatedly ask for information and we don't receive it, it becomes problematic. At that point, we look at no receipts, no information, no request, then it's personal. You're welcome.
Mr. Tolbert, and I don't know if this is really directed at you or just more of my soliloquy about this.
Yes,
I'll
ma'am.
be honest, these situations embarrass me. They're an embarrassment to government. It looks like we can't control our expenditures. That's what really upsets me about this situation, because it puts us in a really bad spot where we've got the paper saying, hey, y'all shouldn't even have P cards. But I understand the implication on your office. If we didn't have these cards countywide, it would be impossible to manage. And so we have to entrust people to follow the protocols we've set. And that's where I'm coming from. I don't care who it is, whether you're elected or whether you're working for the administrator or in any other office in this county. These are taxpayer dollars, and this is for government work and the function of our government. And look, the probate judge does a fantastic job in his office, and I will go ahead and say it again. He was within his budget that we approved. But the problem is these expenditures did not meet our guidelines, and these guidelines must be followed by everybody. So we're not singling anybody out. Everybody in every department, we get these audits routinely, monthly, I think. And so everybody's held to the same standard. One question I do have is county government standard a flow down of state procurement law, or do we come up with our own standards that are completely separate?
Our procurement ordinance was written by county council, however, many years ago, but it is a flow down from the state procurement code.
That's all I have right now. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Pryor.
My question is, Mr. Talbot, is there a monetary limit on these P cards to where certain items can't be purchased? And I know in construction, when these guys are out in the field and they may need to go by a hardware store to get something, that's fine, that's an expense. But these non-expenditures like in office, is there a limit that y'all have on purchases that could be made?
Each person who has a P card, based on the department, number one, before a person gets a P card, the department head and the DCA has to approve each department. We set the limits at $5,000 because we say that's our small purchases. So when facilities go out, they may have a big job going on. We don't want to restrict them, but they go out to Home Depot, Lowe's, get supplies, parts, or wherever to do what they need to do. There are departments who need to order office supplies, whatever in the department. Once we see that it is an issue, or we detect that there is an issue, because we do random audits on all the P cards every month, the first thing we do is we do an investigation. If we realize it's an issue, we turn the P card off, and we do a complete, thorough investigation. There are some folks who have made honest mistakes. They have come in with a check, their own personal check, and they have paid for their issue. So the monitoring device is very close. We go to departments all the time, and we say, hey, look, we have a problem. We consult with the internal auditors. We do a complete review, and sometimes we realize we've made a mistake. It's a legitimate purchase. But the minute we see that a purchase has been made someplace, in a lot of places, the card is blocked. So if you decide to go into a liquor store, that card is blocked. You go into a nightclub, that card is blocked. You cannot use it. However, we find out, because if you go there, it gives us a rejection report.
So my question is,
Yes, sir.
everybody's got the same limit, $5,000 is what you're saying?
Some are less, some are less. Now,
All right, some are less.
we do have some people who are out in the field. They may request a one-time increase in their card because they may be purchasing something. So we will approve it. But there are often times if they need to go over that limit, we will do it in the procurement office for them just to keep everything in balance.
And my last question is, for this board, where do we go from here? That's the question. Where do we go from here? Staff has already brought us the information. They've already completed an audit, so it's incumbent upon us to figure out where do we go from here.
Chair, if I may. and,
Yes, sir, Mr.
you know,
Milton.
When I chaired this committee a few years ago, you know, I took it seriously because I think that these things are very important. And then when you look on pages 5 and 6, it has recommendations. And so that's where I continue to ask the question, because there were recommendations made the last time. You're making recommendations this time. And the hope is that the person responsible would then adhere strictly, you know, to these recommendations, because these recommendations are in compliance with policy. And so, meaning county policy and procurement, the ordinance itself. So how do you hold people accountable do we wait for 2 or 3 more years, and then we say, well, okay, we have more findings, and then these recommendations were not really with fidelity followed, and because the last time some of these were some of the same issues, right?
Yeah, normally, if we have audits and we have problems, and it's under the county administrator, then the county administrator can take action right away.
Right.
In this case, we have an elected official, and that's the reason I'm assuming that we're with
right.
you guys.
Okay.
Elected official, yeah. Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to compliment Mrs. Honeycutt. She kind of, as usual, says it better than I do. But that my problem is the recurrence of this issue. Okay, it's an easy process to follow. When I take a client out for lunch, I photocopy the receipt, I put who all attended there, and I upload it to my payroll system. I do it just like that. So there's no catching up. I do it as I go along. It happened in 22. It happened again here now. The cards are off. My recommendation would be to leave them off for 6 months or a year or whatever this council would consider until we see how. I don't want to put Barrett's team in a bunch of work either, but having to take 20 calls, or maybe the one card stays in the office. I'm open to discuss this. Maybe the one card stays in the office, but it's got to be called in before they use it. The recurrence is what's bothering me. Recurrence.
That's a quick follow-up. I've only been on the council for a year, and how long have we had P cards? How many employees have them? And based on your findings and what you do you have a recommendation whether we should even have them or limit them more? Or what is your, based on your expertise and your investigations, how many people have them? Is it a wise policy to keep it, or is it always going to have issues because people, sometimes the lines aren't entirely clear? And what is your recommendation on that? I mean, how many people have them? How many? It seems to me that that would be something we need to know.
Councilman Kabrowski, we have 840 cards. Some of those cards are gas cards for sheriff deputies. The card and the program itself has been around for more than 20 years. We have infrastructure in place to monitor the cards. What procurement does periodically, and Mr. Tootin made this clear last year, we went out and we did procurement 101 training. We went to everybody and said, come back, learn how to do procurement, but more importantly, we had an in-depth P card training for all employees, especially those who had P cards, to tell them what you can and cannot do with the card. The first thing we say to them is, this card cannot be used for personal use or personal gain, only for the operation of Charleston County government, period. So we go through a training with people. There are some folks who don't either take it seriously, but the minute we find that there's an issue with the card is turned off. Majority of the people who have the cards are responsible. They are responsible. They will call and say, can we get this on the card? We'll say, no, you cannot. This is the process you will need to get it. You cannot buy this with the card. So we go through an active training process to get people to understand how to use the card, and we also let them know what is the serious effect of using this card improperly. And I tell them during the class, if you violate these procurement rules with this card or with any procurement, Charleston County government does not have to pay for it. It may come out of your pocket. So this is explained to everyone who goes through our training throughout the county.
840 cards seems like a lot of cards. A lot of feature being what it is that, could it ever work completely?
I believe the process works fine. I don't believe we need to go penalize everybody because of the actions of one. Because if that's the case, then I'd go out and collect every gun. I'd go out and collect every driver's license. But we don't do that because of accidents or because of shooting. However, we refine the process and we retool the process. And what we've had prosecuted some people who have used that card improperly here since I've been in this department.
Are all
So
840 cards at $5,000, or they're
No, no, sir. No, sir.
What is the approximate amount expendable for the 840 cards? Is there, if you combine all those together, what is the maximum load on that when you combine them? Has that ever been figured out?
I can't figure that out, but I can tell you we spend about $12 million a year on P cards.
So we have about $12 million a year
How much?
being spent on these cards?
$1 million a month. We spend about $1 million a month with the P card purchases.
So for the public hearing this, so they understand, we have 840 cards out and about $1 million is spent on these cards every month.
About, yes, sir.
This so people could kind of judge and Well, thank you. I didn't know that, and I appreciate you telling me that.
And I'll give you an example. If we were to pull all those cards back today, and I can tell you Walt Smalls would be the first person, so would Steve Thigpen come to complain. Because the work that the people who work and their directives do every day, it would slow down. They would have to stop, leave their job site, come to the procurement office, put in a document to get a check cut, to go back to a vendor to get something. So now it's putting them probably 2 to 3 days behind schedule to get their work done. So the card works very effectively for the county and its operations. It's just that there are some who decide who want to go off. And when they do, and sometimes a person may use that card today, right now, as we sit here and speak, for the wrong reason. We're going to get alert potentially from Bank of America, somebody's used this card erroneously, and we will call that person in and say, hey, we got a problem, and we will go through it. So we have alert systems in place so that we will go to people when things are done improperly.
Well, thank you for all your hard work, but my point is 840 employees spending $1 million a month. That's a lot of kind of money being spent more or less on the honor system as you go, unless you find somebody. I just ask if that is of our.
Mr. Administrator, I'm
Well,
sorry.
go ahead, thank you.
If I may just say, the money is budgeted. It's not like it is $1 million just out there somewhere. And this is not only deputies who are in Allendale and McClellanville where there are no county filling stations. These are for EMS vehicles. These are for public works vehicles that are only for gas. So of that 840, some of those are strictly and only for fuel. Some are for supplies. And again, as he alluded to Mr. Thigpen, again, I cannot imagine how people think the county is slow now if we had to go through every single purchase. And there have not been problems. And was it, Barrett, about 5 years ago, we actually cut back 500 or something P-card?
Yes, sir.
Well, there was a problem, and it was addressed then, and since then, I'd say it's been working fairly smoothly.
And, Mr. Chair, as one who runs the largest division in a government organization and certainly looking at efficiency, you need purchase cards. And that's why you have, procurement departments, and you have people who oversee these type things to make certain that with fidelity, processes are being carried out. None of these are illegitimate, well, they shouldn't be illegitimate, and then, in those cases, those, very outlying cases, those things are caught immediately, as we see now. But again, I go back to whosoever, Mr. Pryor or whoever asked, when recommendations are made, that's where I always kind of lean, thinking that the person responsible would just adhere to the recommendations, fix the internal problems, and we never see these things again.
Thank you.
That's the hope.
All right. I'll ask a quick question. Mr. Tolbert, for the benefit of the public that is listening or watching this, would you explain why it's particularly problematic when a unauthorized charge is made on a P card and the county's obligation to make payment for it?
It causes a problem for a number of reasons. Number one, you have violated policy. Two, it can also be viewed as someone may be stealing, which is even more severe than anything in the world. Three, once that person uses that card unauthorized, the county is already on the hook with Bank of America to pay that charge. So we have to pay that charge once someone makes an unauthorized procurement. And that's the biggest issue there. The county is already on the hook because the charge has been made. Bank of America sends us a bill every month that we have to pay.
Final question.
One more, Ms. Grabowski.
I sound stupid for asking, but these are interest-bearing cards, are they not?
No.
Or
No,
not?
sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Following up with the chairwoman's request, Judge Condon, if you'd like to come up and speak, and if it's okay with you, sir, are you willing to have an exchange with council members? Okay.
Yeah, good evening. Irv Condon. Just to let you know, all the expenditures
into the
were
mic.
budgeted, as Ms. Honeycutt. Okay?
There you go. There you go.
It's on now.
Okay, thank you. All the budget, all the items were budgeted, and they are all spent on operations for our probate court. When you talk about food, you got to look at what we've been able to do. And that's to go over to the law school and have people go out and check on our seniors. And I've got a calculation here that if we had to pay for that over the 11 years that we've had that program, it'd be over $500,000. Yes, we did have some issues. I made a change. I fired the financial officer that I had for many, many years, and I did that in the fall. At that time, I asked for an audit, and Ms. Stewart, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said you could not come until July of this year. So I'm glad it came earlier. So all the expenditures benefited the taxpayers of Charleston County. We did not follow procedures, and I regret that. I will reduce the number of P cards down to 1 or 0, whatever you prefer. But the regulations, some of them are archaic, and I have to have you look at those P cards. Did you realize that I can buy flowers, but I cannot buy a sympathy card? Did you realize that single-source water bottles are not allowed under the procurement code? Correct me if I'm wrong. You generally cannot have a single-source water bottle. So I think you need to look at those. Everything we did benefited the community of Charleston. Yes, procedures and prior authorization was not made, but I come here hat in hand, and you can check each one. I don't know how 10 printers would not be that were used in our operations where you couldn't see that we didn't send over the paper to get the authorization. As far as the Amazon charges, that was an honest mistake. I had ordered something online, and then another person in my house came back behind it, and that was the default item. And we quickly recognized that. We had the credit card company reinstate those, and then at the next opportunity, I paid back that money in 2022. And I do things a little bit differently. I've started a drug court, a mental health court, other treatment courts. And I tried to use what I'd learned there to benefit the taxpayers of Charleston County by retaining the employees. I didn't realize that somebody could work 40 years for Charleston County, and I can't buy them a $130 lunch for 20 people at Costco. Come on. What are you telling the employees of Charleston County? We're not there for you? You've got to look at everything that has been spent. It all has benefited Charleston County. Go look at the programs I've started. Go look at the number of outreach items that I've done. Take a look. But when you've got to decide, are printers, did they not benefit the citizens of Charleston County? Did not the other things we did benefit the citizens of Charleston County? I've seen many of you out in the community. Councilman Pryor, you've seen us in the community out doing outreach. And we use incentives to change behavior, and that's why the candy purchases are there. Reverend Middleton, I'm glad you came last night to drug court. I invite all of you. Come see what we're doing. We're out there with the citizens, trying to help the taxpayers of Charleston County. The 2 that graduated last night, they are now out of jail. Think of the savings there. They're now working and paying taxes. I've got my other judges here, Judge Kirshner, Judge Cooten, and Judge Michelle. We're all here working very, very hard. Yes, mistakes were made. We're not perfect. But all the expenditures benefited the city, the citizens of Charleston County. Yeah, you can stand behind some procurement regulations. Yeah, you're up there drinking bottled water. I can't order that. It says it's not allowed under the procurement regulations. Come on. Think of what we've done. In equity, you should applaud us for what we're doing and say, hey, you need to make changes. I did. I fired a longtime friend and made a change, and I've got a new person in there. And I will change. We will not have numerous P cards. I'm ready for 0 or 1. And I know, Mr. Tootin, you want me to stop, and I will. Okay? But I think y'all stand, there's this tension that's out there between elected officials and staff. And every time I come here, it appears that y'all always back the staff. I'm the one out there who always is upset at the bureaucracy that we've built here in Charleston County. Look at the number of DCAs you have here. If Ed Faber were here, the county administrator, he would have one. And so you asked me about $14,000. Once you calculate what these deputy county administrators cost.
Judge Conn, if you
That's
would.
all. Thank you.
Give us, all right.
I
At this time, I'd like, if you wouldn't mind staying up, if you are willing to, I'd like to give council members an opportunity to be either heard on comments or questions. Mr. Pryor.
Quick question. Those 10 printers that you bought, Judge,
Pardon?
those 10 printers
Yes.
that you bought, did you go out and get 2 or 3 bids to see who was the best
Yes.
price, or you just?
Well, actually, what we do is we talk to IT. I'm sure my person at that time talked to IT. During COVID, we were the first court to go online. We're the only court in South Carolina.
I understand, but I
Right,
just
no,
want you
what
to
I'm saying is-
answer my question. Did you, get more than one bid, or you just went with a particular company? That's all I'm asking, because.
I don't know. I would have to defer to the financial officer
Yeah,
at that
because
time.
our code says it has to be, the lowest responsible bid, but I'm just asking a question.
I
You said
understand,
you
but
bought
that's if it's over 5,000. This is under 5.
The 10 printers?
Right. 10 printers, $2,800.
Okay.
Mr. Administrator.
I think I should pass right now, sir.
Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Middleton.
Certainly, Judge Condon, and please let me thank you, because I certainly was heartened at the drug court graduation on last evening, and do appreciate the work there. I wanted to ask specifically about, certainly, I like a good Rotary Club meeting too, and those breakfasts and/or luncheons are sometimes very expensive, so I see that. I also see the North Charleston Business Expo, tickets to the MLK Breakfast Summit, tickets to the Harbor Club for an
Well,
attorneys.
that was for the legal access. It's Charleston Legal Access. That was not Motley Rice. It's miscategorized.
Brown AME Church. I feel that as a pastor, there's more than one church, and so that may be
I've got
preferential.
Miss Jamie Robinson. She can explain all the different community out places we go. We go from Edisto to McClellanville. We go to North Charleston. We go anywhere.
So these gifts that were given to those particular places.
They're not gifts. What they are their fees to come to the breakfast or to a lunch. They're not donations.
Mr. Moody.
Thank you for being here, Judge Condon. And, I don't think anybody questions the programmatic things you're doing. They're fantastic. I mean, my in-laws are taking advantage of some of your probate stuff. And I don't think anybody's questioning whether some of these these charges may be viable for the citizens of Charleston County. But what I think you're not seeing yet is that you can't ask for forgiveness every time. And I think that's
realize
what's
that.
happening.
That's
And,
why-
and let me say too, I mean,
Okay.
insulting the staff is not
I didn't
that's
mean
not
it.
a good that's not good form. But
I'm not
but it
insulting
just-
them. I'm insulting the
Well,
bureaucracy.
I hear you,
understand.
but there are rules that everybody has to follow.
Right.
Okay, nobody's above the law, as
agree.
Mrs. Chairwoman Honeycutt pointed out. If the ROD was in here doing this, we'd have an issue there. If whoever, there are policies and procedures that county councils put in place that must be followed. It doesn't matter who you are, and you can't go out and do it and go, well, I'll just figure it out later. It's just got to be followed, and that's just. I applaud the efforts in the court you've built. It's amazing, but you've got to follow the rules. You've got to follow the rules.
I totally agree. All I'm saying is I reached out and had somebody I thought was protecting my backside. That did not happen. I fired that individual and I moved on. And all the good people here, I work with everyone here. And so I apologize if I offended anyone, but I do believe that what we've done and maybe the expenditures we've had all benefited the citizens of Charleston County. And we're going forward. We'll change the P cards, and we'll do our best not to ever let this happen. But I would love for you to come and see what we're doing. All right, thank you. Any questions?
Judge, I just need to ask you something real quick here. You've repeatedly said how someone was fired that caused these problems. If that's the case, how come these issues have continued for 4 or 5 months since that person left the employment?
My understanding is I've got a new person in there, and she is learning. I'm not sure exactly what issue you're talking about, but I also would ask that the training needs to be a little bit more specific, because I've had 2 that have gone to the training, and then they see us order food, and nobody has said anything. And so that's, I would ask there. But no, I take responsibility for that. I understand you're indicating that some of the issues continue.
And also, I think what Mr. Moody was saying, the process, programs, great, but the process, you order printers, nobody checked with IT to see if they were even compatible with our system. That's part of the problems here, why there are safeguards to know what everything works, why any electronic purchase has to go through IT first. And so again, it's not it's the process, so we don't have to return 10 printers. And I'm just going to be quiet. I know you said it's all for operations of Charleston County, but I do think there are some receipts that would show that might not be the case.
I'm willing to reimburse whatever you think.
That one, the Chewbacca mask, that's an interesting one too.
I'm not sure which that is.
That was ordered in December, lights and a Chewbacca mask that was sent to someone's home address on a county P card. I believe that was sent to you. Was that not sent to him to address, or was it? Did he address it?
It was classified under
Okay.
What's the Chewbacca mask?
Star Wars.
Star Wars.
Mr. Chairman.
Star Wars.
Chair Boykin. Might I make a
Mr.
recommendation?
Moody,
I
go
think-
ahead.
Thank you, sir. I think,
Can I come back to you?
yes, sir,
real quick?
please.
Just one more thing, Judge Condon. I mean, when you talked about staff and as counsel, I don't think nobody have been more supportive.
I understand. I
If your-
apologize.
Hold on, let me finish now.
And I'll just make it real
If
quick.
your office, then this staff and this council, when I was chair, when you came up and you needed positions or you needed things changed, you know, we met, we got everything done. But I think what you fail to realize is process. Nobody is blaming you other than they're saying process. So I don't want you to be offended, but it's something that's called process. And I'm sure you have process and procedures in your office. If your staff don't follow, just like you did with your longtime friend, you fired them. And so all we're asking you to do is follow the process. Nobody's attacking you, nobody, but we are held accountable for this because we actually pass your budget.
I understand that. I
just-
apologize.
Yeah, so I just want to make that clear. I think we all have been supportive, and I know I have because I know what y'all done because I've lost 2 parents, and y'all have been very helpful to me and my family, and I appreciate that. Your drug code, I've been very supportive of that. I've been there before. So I just want you to know that we're not attacking you personally or your work. It's just that the process, because if we let this go, what's to say somebody in the ROD, the treasurer, or somebody in the office say, well, I'm going to do the same thing. So that's all we're asking you, follow the process.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Will do.
And
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we've kind of beat this horse to plenty, in my opinion. I guess a question for Mr. Tootin and maybe for us as well, because again, we've got sort of blended staff. We've got some recommendations in here, but the recommendations are sort of varying. Would it make sense, Mr. Tootin, to have your staff and our auditor maybe try to reconcile and come back to us with a recommended reimbursement amount and 0 cards, 1 card, or something like that, so we've got sort of an agreed upon. I hope. Well, I'm going to put you on the spot, but I hope that maybe we can have a firm recommendation that this council can consider. And Mr. Boykin, maybe we have a special audit meeting before the next council meeting to take it up then, and let's get this thing put to bed.
Mr. Moody, what I might tag on to what you just said is maybe not tie down the staff to $1 amount. Maybe they could offer, 1 or 2, 3, whatever, based on different parameters. And then we as a council could decide which one of those is more appropriate, if that would be acceptable.
That would be fine too, Mr.
Yes,
Boykin.
sir.
If I remember correctly, Mr. Chairman, DCA Ron, I believe we were anywhere from 4,500 to about 12,000 is sort of the difference, somewhere in that, higher than that?
Yeah, 15,000.
Okay. So we can come up with something in between that. Or all of it.
Mr. Middleton, did you have anything you wanted?
Well, I certainly just wanted to point out the fact that, again, on page 5, as a responsible primary party, regardless if we're elected, appointed, we've been hired into these positions, we are responsible, and it becomes the responsibility of the person in charge to figure out what the ordinances are, what the policies are, what the procedures are, and make certain that everybody within or under their employ is following those. So I would just simply, underscore and reiterate, just being responsible, ensuring that county policy and procedures are followed, and establish effective internal control and procedures. Those things are the responsibility of the person in charge. And so you can fire everybody, but inevitably the buck stops.
I guess I'm going to ask this question. If we wanted to, I don't know if it'd be directive or would have to go to full council as a something higher than that. Can we make a directive that staff maintain the director's limits of $500 and one P card for the probate court until further action by council?
I'm fine with
That could come along with the recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that could come back along with a recommendation.
Do we want to make a recommendation to take up the full council
Well, based on what's
or
been
adopt
done,
any recommendations to take the full council?
based on what's been done in the interim as a stopgap, let that continue until they come back with whatever, the recommendations will be that we'll take up. Because right now, they've already created.
Or then we will wait for further recommendations
Right.
to take care of.
I think
Mr.
we
Mid-
take care of all that. Special council meeting, special audit meeting before next council. So we deal with the recommendation and the reimbursement amount.
Anyone else on?
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Honeycutt.
I feel like we have fully vetted this entire issue. I would like to go ahead and make the recommendation so that we can take this up Tuesday. I feel like we have enough information before us that we can go ahead and make a motion. And the motion should be that the probate court will have one P card with the $500 limit, and that his, there were two other, what were the other recommendations, Reverend Middleton?
Reimbursement.
Yes.
Yeah,
That reimbursement amount can be defined Tuesday, but it will not be less than $4,555. And I think those are the two biggest ones.
the two biggest ones.
I'll second that, Ms. Honeycutt.
We have a motion made and properly seconded. Any discussion?
We've discussed it enough.
You know what, the
Not
chair,
on the committee members.
before we go on, the chair, Mr. Tootin makes a good point. Do we have a time limit on the one P card?
I would just put until further action of council, and that way it's there till it doesn't need to be, or circumstances change.
Or unless the
Next
probate
audit.
office decides they don't want to participate in the program, which is certainly your prerogative. I don't.
Sure.
We're just not sure of the operation.
Sure. Thank you.
All right, I'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Any other business for the
Yes, sir.
committee? This time, the committee stands adjourned, and turn it back over to the chairwoman.
All right, we'll move into our Finance Committee meeting, of May 2nd. I'll be sharing tonight as Mr. Sass is absent. Everyone's on this committee, so first item is
Move for
to,
approval.
we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of April 18th, 2024. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion passes. We have a.
Move for approval.
Second.
All right, we have a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Item 3,
For approval, A and B.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Yes, Mr.
Thank you. Grants, love grants. Bring them.
All right. Thank you
Thank
to
you.
our DOTIS team for bringing those grants.
So when
All in
when
favor,
was
say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion
Equally
carries.
as excited.
Move for approval.
Second.
All right. Properly moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Item 5, Greenbelt. We have a presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of council. I'm going to give you some overall stats that reflect just very minor changes as this was provided to you back in February. We haven't gone through any additional application cycles since then, so I'll hit the high points. Since the first round of awards way back in 2007, overall, you all have approved 207 projects, which has protected 25,168 acres and committed almost $144 million in funding. Average cost per acre of $5,573. And it has generated a match of 143%, $206.3 million, and typical matches provided are applicant financing, other grants. The seller sometimes donates the value of some of the property, and also the applicants will pledge future development funds for public parks. Of all these projects, 44% have some degree, 44% of the acres and 87% of the funding is tied to some degree of current or planned public access. And our minority lands funding is at $58.9 million and 3,890 acres. Next, I'll give you a snapshot of our remaining funds summary. So projected remaining funds for the rural allocation for the lifetime of the remainder of the first and second half-penny sales tax is $102.6 million. Of that, $19.2 million is cash in hand currently available for use. Urban, $82.8 million projected lifetime balance with $3.5 million currently available. Overall, $185.4 million with $22.7 million currently available. Now, this will change shortly. Of course, there are some projects that will come before you tonight and on Tuesday. Those total about $7 million. So if all were approved, that would leave $15.8 million just until July 1st, when FY25 allocation will go back into that pot for an estimated around $28.8 million for FY25 and funds available.
Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Mrs. Honeycutt. $185 million, that's the lifetime balances for the 2 sales taxes left to run, is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you have an idea what your kind of annual burn rate is? I know we can have a Boone Hall come in or something big, but, do we do on average 10 projects a year at how much? I mean, what's our burn rate? I'm trying to get to when this money would run out.
Yeah, just thinking over the last couple of years that I've been here, we're usually just getting into the double digits, so maybe 10 to 12 million per year would be my best guess without going back.
Okay, so in the absence of a renewal of the half-cent sales tax, 10 to 15 years, we might stop conserving land. Thank you, Ms. Honeycutt.
Mr. Gabrowski.
The other way of asking that question is, if the sales tax is rejected because we combine everything, there's still $185 million left for Greenbelt funding, is that correct?
That's the projected lifetime balance. So budget projects out over, collections over the lifetime of both sales taxes.
So the public knows, I'm a great advocate of the Greenbelt projects, but none of us know what's going to happen with the sales tax referendum. Whether we're for it or against us, we can't control that. That's up to the public. But even if it's rejected, if it's all in one vote, there's still $185 million left from the previous sales tax that could be spent on Greenbelt projects. I just wanted to, I'm correct in that.
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Does that conclude your presentation? Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Boykin?
Not quite.
Do you want to let him finish the presentation first? That's okay. Mr. Davis, why don't you go ahead and finish,
Okay.
and then we'll ask questions.
All right, almost there. As you know, the urban allocation is further broken down into municipalities. And I know that's small, but the big takeaway is we do still have the 2 allocations, Folly Beach and the unincorporated county area, that are forward spent and are in the negative right now. But again, for the total lifetime projections, all of those allocations still have funds remaining. You'll notice the goal slide's just a little bit different since the last update, and the reason for that is we've been working with the GAB on looking at these goals and maybe recalibrating those. One thing we did is broke out the corridor acres a while back. We all discussed that it's better to track those by miles and not necessarily acres, because we're typically talking about these multi-use paths. And we reached out to the Council of Governments and got some information from them. So the original goal breaks down to about 200 miles of corridors. Others have provided 93 miles of these multi-use paths, and Greenbelt funds have been approved so far for about 6 miles for a total of 99 miles, and we're actually at about 50% of that goal now. The ones above have not changed. We're still working on urban lands and rural lands and exceeded the others. And we've had 2 closings, both reimbursements, since February, with 11 projects still pending closing. And lastly, we are in the middle of the FY24 winter application cycle. The FY25 summer application cycle will open June 3rd, and deadline for submitting applications will be July 26th. And happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Boykin.
I was just going to say, contrary to Mr. Kabrowski's point, should the third transportation sales tax pass, what might you do with $432 million?
Well, the price of land is always increasing, so that does seem like a large chunk of change, but it will only go so far. We'll put it to good use.
Anyone else? Mr. Davis, thank you so much. We appreciate all that your department does.
You're welcome.
Wonderful. All right, so we have items B through F. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Can I pull one out?
Sure.
Just to thank you, 5C.
Move to approve 5B, D, E, F.
Second.
We have moved and seconded 5B, D, E, and F. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Item 5C, Mr.
Ms. Chair, the mayor of Lincolnville is here, and certainly Mayor Enoch Dickerson. And may we give him an opportunity, just out of courtesy, to say, I think the 5D is going to his area.
Welcome, Mayor. Thank you for being here tonight. Please join us at this podium, and we're happy to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I was asking for your support on the project that's been presented before you. Is 2 acres of green belt that we have attached to another 2 acres that we're currently trying to, it's an old project. I mean, it's connected to our, I call it a one-man jail, and our old fire department. That's we're trying to preserve and the quality of life of the people in Lincolnville. So any support that you could give us would be greatly appreciated. But the project has been presented. Eric and his staff has been out, and we've approved the appraisal of $100,000 for 2 acres of land. And the house that will be renovated will be our welcome center, and we're trying to get a museum and a library in the same spot, which be connected to another 2 acres of land that will improve the quality of life of the people in Lincolnville.
Wonderful. Mr. Pryor has a question.
That just passed, Mayor, and Tuesday night we expect it to pass. So,
Right.
yeah, we just passed it out of committee, and when it comes to council on Tuesday, we expect it to pass similarly. So congratulations, and we will continue to work with you as much as we can, because we know Lincolnville, everybody wants to get their hand on you, like your city, like everybody else now, because there's no way for future growth. Everybody's coming up north, so be prepared.
We're trying to preserve as much as we can.
And we're here to help you.
Thank you so much.
Sits in my district, so I'm here to help you any way I can.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Reverend Middleton, for recognizing. Item 5C.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank Eric and the staff for doing a great job on everything and preserving over 25,000 acres of preserving our land in a natural state. The Mount Pleasant Way Rifle Range project is entirely in my district. It's basically to build a 10-foot sidewalk there. And this is something I'm very familiar with, and at first I thought, what a great project, but upon reflection and meeting with people in the community, it's very similar to what we heard from the people on James Island. A lot of this is, I remember Rifle Range Road, when I first moved, it was like the most beautiful canopy and the sense of peace you had from Coleman Boulevard all the way to an ended. And that's been gradually almost non-existent except in spots. And I think this is more of a transportation issue that perhaps could be put on the sales tax referendum, but increasing 5-foot sidewalks to 10-foot sidewalks is more, putting a lot more concrete in there and impervious surfaces. And a lot of these areas are, whether it's 6 Mile, 2 Mile, are areas just like to me, it's like the 10 Mile issue all over again. A lot of people who have lived there, it's taken their land away, and the feelings of the people, a lot of them don't want it. I just wonder if we could put that on Hungry Neck, and it's not a trail. It's not a preserving. If this was preserving a natural area that people can have access to that they wouldn't have before, I think it'd be great if it was a new park, a new green space for East Cooper. But it's pouring more concrete to make a 5-foot sidewalk at 10-foot, and through historic, a lot of it's, not all, but historic settlement communities where people won't see it like that. And I feel we should defer, and before we go ahead with this project, get their buy-in to it. And I just feel it's more of a transportation issue. It's not creating a nature trail. It's along a highway. Again, this putting more concrete in, less tree canopy, more flooding is going to happen from that. And I just think this is one project I'd rather see that money in. If we're going to do something, East Cooper is to preserve and buy areas and keep it from being developed, to preserve more acres to put off from development.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Cabrazzi. I think Mr. Boykin had a question.
Yes.
I was going to move for discussion.
We need a
Go ahead, I'm
motion
sorry.
to approve or not approve on this.
For approval.
I thought it was
Okay,
still.
do we have a
I'm sorry.
second? We have a second. So motion by Mr. Moody, second by Reverend Middleton. Now we can discuss.
Okay.
Is there any further discussion on this item?
Yes. To my understanding, unless I'm confused, and sometimes I become confused, we don't go after these greenbelt projects themselves. Somebody made an application for this, right?
That's correct.
So what are we talking about? I mean, I'm just trying to understand. You said that
Well, we
somebody's
still
against
have,
it.
it's coming to us to approve.
It's coming to us to approve, yes,
Use of the
but
money.
we did not go out and say that we're going to put this there, right?
I'm not suggesting that we did, but I'm suggesting before we do it, that we get the buy-in of the people who live there. This is not, it's part of a much larger project. It's not like the people on Rifle Range went out and requested that. So it's part of the Mount Pleasant Way. It's to connect all of Mount Pleasant, and it's to connect, there's a lot of good aspects of this, but it's, again, this specifically, as I understand it, is what the money would be for 5C, and tell me if I'm wrong, would be to increase the sidewalk from 5 feet to 10 feet. Pretty much what it is. Am I wrong on that?
So this is one of our corridor projects. We're a hubs and spokes model. The spokes are the
Right.
corridors that connect green spaces together. Our funds will only be used for right-of-way acquisition where it's required. So none of our funds will go into actually designing or building this. Mount Pleasant has received a federal grant and is bringing that money to the table. They have had several public meetings on this. I attended the second one, listened in on those. They've also done a public survey. The public survey was overwhelmingly in support of the project. And they told folks at that meeting, if you don't want a 10-foot wide multi-use path in front of your house, if we can't work with you, we will not purchase any additional easement. We will just keep it as in the existing right-of-way,
Mr.
whether that's
Boykin.
5 foot or 10 feet.
So if I can ask.
Mr.
Go ahead.
Cabrazzi, you recognize Mr. Boykin.
Mr. Davis, if I'm not mistaken, is this not the town of Mount Pleasant trying to use part of their share of the Greenbelt funds in the urban area?
Councilman Boykin, I think this is the 5th or 6th Mount Pleasant Way project that they've
So
requested to use
normally
these
the
funds
request
for.
was generally driven by the municipality.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, that's all I need.
Mr. Pryor?
So our money would only be used for right-of-way, but not eminent domain, correct?
Correct.
So
And they-
it would be the willingness of the people to sell the property without eminent domain.
Correct. Our funds can't be used for eminent
Right.
domain.
That's what I wanna make sure.
And the town of Mount Pleasant at the public meeting said they would not use eminent domain on the project.
So all this would be on a voluntary basis, and so What I probably would like to see happen is we reimburse Mount Pleasant, let them go through the process and buy what they want. So it takes us out the middle of this, and then if they get it, we pay them on the back end, because I don't want anybody to perceive us as going and taking folks' property. We got enough of that out now in that area, so this might be a legal question, or maybe you, Mike, can answer it. Is there any way that we can tell the town of Mount Pleasant, once they acquire the right of way, we would reimburse them through the green belts?
We've had those conversations already. That's the current plan. Actually, met with Assistant County Attorney today to start those discussions.
All right, so that takes us out the middle, but all this would be voluntary, not eminent domain.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Davis, what was the Greenbelt vote on this project? The board vote?
Unanimous.
Okay. So all 9 of our appointees supported this project?
14, and I think we had a few absent.
Thank
Call for the question?
Can I ask one more question?
The question has been called for, so we have to take a vote at this point. No, sir. All right, all in favor of item 5C, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. Item 6, Madam Attorney, we have a need for executive session.
Yes, ma'am. Executive session is needed for receipt of legal advice pursuant to the documentation listed on the agenda.
So moved.
Second? All right, motion seconded, we'll be in executive session.
Vote, Ms. Honeycutt?
Well, sorry,
Yep.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3. We don't.
We could get a quorum anyway.
I know, right? We got the chairman.
So is Walt the Secretary of Agriculture?
You only need one.
Cutting back on the bureaucracy.
That's what Shonda said. He had assistant county administrator.
Right, I mean, yeah, they weren't called DCAs back then, but there were at least 3 of them. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
We are back from executive session. No motions were made, no actions were taken. I believe that concludes our finance committee. We are.
Madam Chair,
Yep.
before we adjourn, I know you're
Yes,
ready
sir.
to go. I wanted to just ask one question, or at least hopefully get a little consensus around the climate action plan when we can bring that back. We were looking at June 13th or July 18th. What would be the appetite of this council so that staff can
Bring it.
June 13th or July 18th?
13th is fine, why wait?
Either of those dates are.
When are we going to approve budget? When is that?
Well,
Looked
if
at
it's
it.
a committee meeting, budget won't be on.
Look at it
that
to kind of get out of the way of budget, to get out of the way of the language for the
Budget will get
referendum.
started on that.
And if we can't get it, we can always delay it. You shoot for one date, and if we can't, then you move to July.
13th, so is that a good feeling?
I would say subject to any further insight from the clerk on what other items we have, then
Absolutely.
seems to be okay.
So, Mr. Smalls? Okay, thank you so much.
All right, we're adjourned.
I gotta go to North Charleston. I gotta go to North Charleston. They got their meeting. I'm just gonna pop my head in and talk, see what you're talking about.